Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to day 4 of my 2024 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Porcupine for You add-on, Porcupine for You, Our Friendship Grows, A Bug Deal, and Stinkin' Cute. So I've stamped the images I'll be using on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm starting with my porcupine, and I decided to go a very different route than the previous 2 times that I've colored these little porcupines from Lawn Fawn. I decided to go super dark. I was actually Googling some images of porcupines, and I saw some that were this really dark chocolatey brown, and I thought they looked so super cute. So I thought I'd give that a try. I'm using E43, E44, E47, and E49 for the main part of the body. Starting with the E49 and adding a little bit of shading in with that. I only used a very small amount of the E49 because it is a super dark color and I don't want to lose the features. So I blended out the E49 with the E47, and then I brought in the E44. And then I saved some room in the center of the body for the E43, mainly to lighten up the face area. I really wanted you to be able to see those eyes. So I'm making sure to color right over the edge of that E44 and kind of push that back a bit to make everything a bit more visible. And I do really like the way that he turned out. I really love that rich dark brown. But if you wanted to limit yourself to just 3 colors, you could probably leave off the E49. I'm actually going to leave off the E49 when I do the quills, so you can kind of see the difference between how that turns out and the body and kind of compare the two. So for the quills, I'm starting with the E47 and then blending out with the E44. And I'll use the E43 for the highlight along the edges. So again, in those pictures that I was Googling, the porcupine quills were not very different from the actual body. So that's why I decided to keep the same colors, but just leave off the darkest shade to distinguish those a little bit differently. Next, I'm going to bring in some pink tones. I'm using R000 with R21 and R22. I'm going to use the R22 to add in some rosy cheeks and blend that out a bit on the edges with the R21. I'll also use the R21 to fill in the nose and the insides of the ears. And then I went back and added a little extra of that R22 on the cheeks because he is so dark and that does dry back a little bit, so it will be a little bit lighter. Then I'm going to move on to my sunflowers, and I'm going to color them very differently than typical. I didn't want to do yellow sunflowers. I wanted to do something that would fall in the Valentine color palette since this is going to be a Valentine card. So I decided to go with pinks. I was remembering some sunflowers that I saw in the fall that were actually pink toned. Sunflowers do come in a whole bunch of varieties and different colors as well. And I remember seeing these soft pink ones at the grocery store and really loving them. So that's what I used as my inspiration. So I'm starting right around the center of this largest flower with that R22, and then I'm going to blend that out with the R21, and then I'm going to bring in that R000 to blend it toward the tip. I did leave a little bit of white space on the very, very tip of each of those petals just to add a little extra highlight. And making sure to color in those back petals as well and use a little bit more of the darker colors so that you can see that they're in shadow and just give them a little extra depth. I did do a second layer on that largest flower just to differentiate it a little bit from the smaller ones. I wanted them all to be in the same color palette, but I really wanted that largest one to stand out and just be a bit more vibrant. So I did 2 layers of coloring on that one, and then I'm only going to do 1 layer on the other 2 small flowers. So I'm doing the same technique. I'm also doing a little less of the R22 on the darkest part for the smaller flowers that will also separate those out a bit and just make them a little bit softer in color, but blending out with the same shades all the way almost to the tip and leaving that tiny little extra bit of white for a highlight. And I really love the way that these turned out. I think they look so soft and pretty. So I'm going to do the third one exactly the same. So I'm just working my way around that flower, adding the same amount of that darkest shade to each of the petals around the center. Also adding that darkest color around the center helps make it look a little bit more recessed, a little bit more in shadow, and that also adds a bit of depth to the images and makes them pop a bit more off the page, makes the ends of the petals look like they are standing up a little bit more than just being equally flat as the center part of the flower. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to remove the R000 and add in the R24 to color in my hearts. That way they will tie in nicely with the flowers, but just be a bit more bold. All of the hearts are from the Porcupine For You stamp set, except for the largest one, which is from the Porcupine For You add-on. I put the darkest R24 down at the bottom right side and blended toward the top left on all of those to keep them consistent. And then I'm going to bring in yellow to do the centers of the flowers. I'm going to use Y02, Y06, and Y08. And I'm just going to add a nice thick band of that darkest shade, the Y08, down at the bottom right hand side as well. No rhyme or reason to why I chose the right side. It's just comfortable for me being left-handed. If it's more comfortable for you to put your shadows on the left, feel free to do so. I just like to keep it consistent. So as I did the hearts, I'm going to do the flowers the same way. So I blended out the Y08 with the Y06, and then I used the Y02, and then I felt like I just wanted a little extra highlight. I didn't want the centers to be really bold compared to the petals, so I brought in Y000 for the last little bit, and then I used the Y08 to color in the centers of the small flowers, and the Y000 to color in the base of each of the petals of those small flowers, which are from the Stinkin' Cute stamp set. Then I'm going to move on to my leaves. I'm going to use YG21, YG23, and YG25. A couple of these leaves, the three largest ones are from the A Bug Deal stamp set, and then the smaller ones are from Our Friendship Grows. But I think they make a nice combination of sizes, so that's why I added all of those in together. I'm going to use the YG25 down at the base of each of the leaves, and then blend out with the YG23, and then I'll use the YG21 for the highlight. Because this is more of a yellow-green, I think it ties in nicely with the centers of those flowers. And that's also why I went with these particular yellows for the centers rather than like the Y15, Y17. Those have a little bit more of a warmer orangey tone. So I just tried to keep the colors kind of matching all together. Then I'm going to take a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just add a few extra little lines into the porcupine's quills to just add a bit of highlight to those and add a few extra little details. And then I'm going to trim all of these images out with their matching dies. Next, I'm going to take the largest of the Lawn Fawn Stitched Heart Stackables and die cut that out of some Ballet Slippers cardstock, and I will set that aside for now. From the rest of that piece of Ballet Slippers, I'm going to bring in Finley's ABCs, and I'm going to spell out the word quill. So I'm just going to pull off each of the letters that I need and to hold those in place with a little bit of Post-it tape. That's just going to keep them in position while I run that through my die cutting machine. I will have to run the L through twice, so I just ran it through the first time with the other letters and then did one additional pass for the last L. And then I can set all of that aside and work on the rest of my sentiment. I'm going to pop a piece of ground coffee cardstock into my MISTI and treat that with my Rabbit Hole Designs powder tool because I want to heat emboss on this. I'm going to stamp my sentiment down with Versamark ink, which is just a clear sticky ink that works great for embossing. And I am masking off the word quill in the sentiment because I have die cut those letters out of the ballet slippers. I'm going to mask that once more so I can stamp it down again and just make sure that that is nice and bold. And then I will coat that with some Lawn Fawn white embossing powder. I just keep it in this big tub because I use it the most often. And then I will tap off any excess. I had a little bit of powder stick to part of the word quill, so I just used a paintbrush to brush that away. And then I'm going to heat my heat gun off to the side for about 30 seconds to a minute. And then I bring it to both the front and the back to try to minimize any warping until that powder starts to melt and gets nice and bright white. There you can see that. Then I'll set that aside and pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using another piece of ballet slippers that I've scored and folded to a standard A2 size card. It's 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. I'm going to stamp out another little porcupine and butterfly and also a sentiment, all from the Porcupine for You stamp set using Lawn Fawn bubblegum ink. And I did stamp that down twice as well to make sure it was nice and bold. And then I am going to bring in a little bit of pattern paper from the Spiffy Speckles 6x6. I'm going to use this white with the yellow fleck to pull in the centers of all of the flowers that I've done. And trim that down with the largest of the outside in stitch rectangle stackables. And then I can just pop that out of the die. It's going to trim off a slim little border so that the card base is going to show through on the edges. So now I'm ready to start assembling. I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back of that pattern paper and adhere that to the card front. Now you can see what I mean about the border of the ballet slippers showing through on the edge, which is also going to tie the whole color palette together. I've added some foam tape to the back of my heart, and I'm going to pop that up towards the top of the card to give me room at the bottom for my sentiment. So I've laid out the word quill, and I decided not to put it in a straight line. I wanted to have a little bit of whimsy there. Those letters are not attached. I just used them as kind of a guideline so that I could add the embossed part of my sentiment first down at the bottom and make sure that I left some room for that. And I did trim that down with the smallest of the everyday sentiment banners from Lawn Fawn. Then I'm going to start in the center of my sentiment. I wanted to make sure that the eye was right under the point of the heart, and then I can add the letters on either side of that. I'm using my EK Success reverse tweezers to hold on to those letters so that I don't get my fingers full of glue as I add that to the back, and then just figure out where I want those placed and press those down. And the L's are skinnier letters than both the Q and the U, so they take up a little bit less space, even though I did try to space them evenly apart. But we will fix that at the end, so don't worry. So I'm just adding that Q where I want it to go. And once I have added that, that has also given the little sentiment banner time to dry. So I can flip that card over and trim off any excess using my Cutter Bee Teflon coated scissors. So now I can bring in my images, and I did use the little extra die that cuts out the hand of the porcupine so that I could slide the largest heart there and just make it look extra Valentine's Day. And he's going to go right in the center. I'm going to lay out my flowers first to make sure I get my placement right. I wanted him kind of standing amongst those, so I'm just figuring out how I want those to go. also figure out what needs to be glued down first. I am only going to add glue to the centers of the flowers so that I have room to tuck my leaves back behind them. Otherwise, the glue dries so fast that I wouldn't be able to do that once they were dry. So then I added my porcupine, and then next I'm going to add one of the small flowers right below him as if he's popping out of the bouquet. And then the other small flower I'm going to add to the top right hand side. And then I'm just going to work with these leaves and kind of fill in any gaps. It's okay if some of the pink of the heart shows because we do want to keep that shape of the heart. But I want to fill in, a good bit of it to make it look nice and full and lush. So I'm just tucking leaves in here and there and kind of using those to fill up space. I have a little bit more space to fill up on the right hand side since we have the smaller flowers over there, but that's okay. I have plenty of leaves for that. So I'm just tucking those in wherever I think that they should go. And then of course I have the small white flowers as well. So those can also be used to fill in some gaps and just add a little bit of extra depth and interest to this bouquet. So I'm just dabbing on a little bit of glue again in the center there. That way I can shift around if I need to without too much work because it takes them a little bit more time to dry. I thought about putting one of the flowers in the porcupine's quills, but I decided against it because it covered up the ear too much and he already had the heart in his hand, so I decided not to. So now I just have that last remaining flower I'm trying to figure out the placement for. But ultimately I decided that I liked the looks of the smaller flowers kind of layered up together, and then I didn't like the line of 3 that created on the other side. So I pulled up the one that was at the top center right above the porcupine's head, and I'm going to add that kind of layered in with one of the other ones. Then I'm going to take that little trio of hearts and add that right to the right hand side of the last L in our die cut sentiment to kind of take up some of that extra space because those L's are a little bit skinnier. So all that's left is to add a bit of glitter. So I'm going to use my favorite Stardust Stickles and add that to the centers of the sunflowers. And again, I like to put it in the shaded area. I think it pops the most on the darkest color. And then I'm also going to add it to the hearts, and I covered the entire heart for those. And then I did decide to add it to the bottom of each of the letters just to give those a little extra something and bring some of that glitter down toward the bottom of the scene. And that is going to finish this card up. So I am going to lift that to the camera so you can see all of that detail, hopefully catch a little bit of that sparkle and shine, and give you another peek at the inside as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had so much fun mixing old and new sets together. It's something I really love to do. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love to hear from you. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted whenever I post a new video. All of the products I used today will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 4 of the previous 2 years of Valentine Card Series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye!